Welcome to Abstract Audio, the podcast presenting life as an abstract art form. The show that encourages you to perceive beyond the tangible, to extract the infinite from the finite, to see with the mind what you cannot physically see with the eyes. Oh, it's an emancipation. It's an exploration into areas usually overlooked. Explore with me on today's episode. Hello again, all you artists, abstract thinkers, and curious wanderers out there. Today, you are back with your host, Amber Janae, the one and only, on a little something I like to call the Abstract Audio Podcast. Okay, listen up and listen good, because we are about to totally push the boundaries of what we think we know yet again, and maybe even challenge a few beliefs along the way. No matter what goes down, I hope you're ready because I definitely am. So, you know how we talked attraction last episode, right? And we all know just how easy it is to get distracted by what enters your energetic field. How we're drawn to things, people, ideas, whatever. You know, we talked about the paradox of opposites attracting versus attracting what you really are. And if you really sit with all that long enough, it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? It makes you wonder why, when we feel that pull, that initial attraction, why do we start convincing ourselves that whatever we're attracted to or whatever's attracted to us is actually meant for us? Like it's a part of our destiny or something. If you want to talk fate, you can check out season 1. But it's really wild to me just how quickly attraction can roll into the idea of ownership, right? I mean, think about it. You find something or someone you're really drawn to, and suddenly it's not just that you want it or like it, it's that you need it. I mean, you convince yourself that it's yours. What's meant for you will always find its way to you, no matter how many detours or delays you encounter, right? That's what they say. I mean, we see it all the time. I mean, ever since we were toddlers fighting over blocks in preschool. What starts as attraction becomes this sense of, that's mine. And once we get it, we hold on to it so tightly. But hold on, because is that really how it works? Man, your guess is as good as mine. But today, we're talking ownership. I mean, you could say this about a lot of shit, but it seems to be the one thing that everyone really wants, but nobody really has. Like, if you think about it, like owning stuff, having your name on something, it's one of the most celebrated concepts in our culture, right? But here's the thing. Do we even really own anything? Or are we just renting until we're gone? Yep, this is about to get existential, y'all. So stick with me. So let's start with something that we see in the headlines all the time, literally. Tons of rappers and artists fighting to own their masters. I mean, the term itself, y'all, masters is already so loaded, right? It's not like we didn't hear that word enough in the worst historical context possible. But here it is again, except this time it's music. And we're all about the art within the science here, Well, artists are constantly talking about owning their masters. And I remember, the first time hearing about it, and I remember thinking like, why is something that you created not automatically yours? And that kind of sent me down this weird path, this weird rabbit hole, of course. And that's the weird thing about ownership, As we all know by now in the music industry, owning your masters is considered a rebellious move, right? Like something only the savviest, most business-minded rappers can pull off. I get it, if you wrote the song, if you laid down the beats, if you built that track from the ground up, shouldn't it be yours? It's really a fundamental question about creative ownership, because why should some suit in a stuffy office building somewhere so far removed from your life and your life struggles own the rights to your pain, your joy, your art. Even intellectual property, to me, is like a slippery slope, right? Hell, I mean, if you work with a photographer, or if you have in the past, you don't even own those pictures he took of you. He does. Which has always been just ridiculous to me, since, especially if you paid for the shoot and hired him to do a job. But I digress. And I mean, I'm not just going to brush past the connection to slavery there. We'll run it back. We'll run it back. Because why is it even called masters? It's almost too on the nose. Like, we're still operating in the same oppressive systems, but now we've just dressed it up in contracts and lawyers and royalty percentages. Because we have, and we are. We've swapped out physical shackles for legal ones in more ways than one. Same chains, different day. And that's always been crazy, but here's when it gets wild. Because what's true for artists and their music is kind of true for all of us, right? I mean, none of us actually own anything. Not really. Like, think about it. You've got, say, a brand new house, right? You posted a picture of you, holding the keys up on Facebook. You're feeling good about it. But do you really own that house? Or are you just one bad financial decision away from it all slipping out from under you? Hey, miss a few mortgage payments and suddenly the bank's knocking at your door. And let's not even get started on the property tax thing. You might think that you own that house. Yeah, sure. But stop paying taxes on it and see how quickly the government will remind you who's really in charge. That's why it's always so funny for me to hear the progression of the renting versus owning debate nowadays. Because, for years, people have been fed this narrative that homeownership is the ultimate goal, right? The big dream, the American dream, right? You buy a house, you settle down, pick out the perfect furniture, and boom, you made it. You made it, buddy. But lately, the cracks in that dream have become more and more apparent, right? Housing crisis, anyone? Man, it's like homeownership used to be this symbol of stability, but now it's kind of like a cruel joke. Because most people can't afford to buy a home, and even if they do, they're paying on that thing for 30 years. 30 years. That's a life sentence right there. Like, for life. You're not free. You're chained to that house, chained to the banks that are crashing if you look around, chained to the system, and renting may seem like less glamorous for sure, but at least you're not shackled to a mortgage that could crush you at literally any moment. Y'all, this isn't just about houses or that master bedroom suite up in it. It's everything. Your car, your clothes, your tech, your partner. All these things you think you own or got on lock, they're just temporarily in your possession. Ownership nowadays is just a clever way of saying, hey, you've got this for now. And the moment you can't keep up with the payments or the maintenance or the tax, you realize how fleeting it all really is. And not to be a Debbie Downer here, but speaking of the government, let's talk about this whole idea of being owned. I'm not talking slavery. I mean, you've probably heard it floating around social media by now or came across it in your research if you've done any. But we like to think of ourselves as free individuals, right? For the most part. But if you ever stop to think about that little social security card you've got tucked away somewhere, if you're Black, under your mattress or at your mom's house, yeah, that little number that tracks you from the moment you're born to the day you die, yep, that's the one. And that's the government's way of saying, hey, you're ours. And we don't think about it much. It's more of an eyes wide shut kind of thing. But the government knows everything, right? Your job, your income, where you live, what you buy. And that's not even getting into the whole surveillance side of things. It's all connected, man. It's all connected. That social security number is like a barcode stamped on your life, your product in the system. No matter how much you think you own your destiny, spoiler alert, you don't. But here's the bigger question, because is ownership really empowering, or is it just another form of control? We think that owning things gives us this freedom, right? But doesn't it really just tie us down? Like, think about it. If you don't own, you can pick up and move wherever you want. You're not stuck fixing the roof or the plumbing or worrying about property values. There's just a certain freedom in not owning that I feel like a lot of people don't address. Maybe we've got it all backwards. Maybe we're being made to focus on the wrong goals. Maybe doing so is in the better interest of the higher-ups. And if you don't like maybes, here's the facts. The fact is that this entire system, this whole idea of ownership, is built on a foundation of materialism and greed. We've been trained to think that having stuff equals success, that the more you own, the more you're worth. But think about it. What does that even really mean? Money itself, and I say this all the time, is a ridiculous concept. And I may have mentioned my disdain to you guys before in the past, so forgive me if I sound like a broken record, but it's paper. It's numbers on a screen. And as time goes on, it's numbers on a screen. But we built our entire lives around chasing it, accumulating it, owning things with it. We've created a system where your value as a person is tied to the things that you own. The car you drive, the house you live in. But at the end of the day, all that stuff is temporary. You can't take it with you. And a lot of this shit, in my opinion, we weren't meant to have as a society anyway. Naturally, this whole obsession with ownership creates inequality too, because not everyone can own things. Not everyone has the same access to wealth, to property, to resources. And at the end of the day, ownership is inherently tied to privilege. And privilege is inherently tied to inequality. The more you own, the more power you have. And isn't that the core of our entire society? Those who own the most, land, businesses, capital, are the ones who make the rules. So what kind of rules do you think those would be? So if you take nothing else away from this, just wonder if maybe ownership isn't just about stuff. Maybe it's about power. And as you know, the more episodes I do, the more it keeps coming back to that. And maybe that's why we cling to it so desperately. But at what cost? Let's face it, owning more doesn't make us better people. It just creates more barriers between those around us and ourselves, if you really think about it. Defining yourself through what you have is guaranteed to leave you feeling empty. But hey, that's what we're all taught to strive for, when life is so much more than what we can see and physically touch. Speaking of feelings, there's another type of ownership we don't really talk about as much, that I wanted to touch on. And it's kind of cool, you may have heard it, the phrase owning the room. It's that whole idea of walking into a space and just commanding it, it's something I'm still working on, but obviously there's no physical ownership happening here. But there's just something about presence, confidence and energy that makes people feel like they've got it locked down, okay? And to me, that kind of ownership, like a lot of things, it's all about perception, right? It's about how you carry yourself, how others see you. But even this idea of owning the room plays into a larger power dynamic, because the people who can effortlessly take control of a space are often the ones with more privilege or better life circumstances. Whether that's privilege of race, gender, or status, whatever. So when we say someone owns the room, what are we really saying? That they've mastered social dominance? Shit, if so, I gotta find me a master class on that. Teach me, I'm trying to dominate. Even still, if there's one place you can't dominate though, it's personal relationships. Am I right? So when we talk about ownership in that context, man, it can get messy, right? We like to think that love and friendship are all about equality and mutual respect. But there's often that underlying feeling of ownership there. You know, my partner, my friend, my bitch, my nigga, right? Of course, we don't mean it literally, but there is an implied sense of possession there. People get possessive in relationships, I think, because they see the other person as something they own. It's why jealousy exists, you know? It's why people freak out when their partner gets too friendly with somebody else. It's why threesomes aren't always a great idea. Do you know what I mean, though? It's like that line between love and ownership gets really blurry. We start thinking of people as ours, and that's when things kind of go sideways. You don't own someone just because you're close to them. They're not your pets. I mean, unless they like that shit, like I do. So, what if we flip the script, though? What if we just let go of this need to own? What if we stop trying to accumulate things and people and instead focused on experiences, on living in the moment? Truth is, we don't need to own anything, okay? Bottom line, we don't need it. Ownership is a social construct, another widely accepted lie, a story we've been told to justify systems of control and inequality. Now, if you really want to fuck the system, let's talk about the idea of sovereignty. So if you follow me on Instagram, you know that that's been in my header for years. But if you don't really know exactly what it means, you know, you're not alone. I didn't either at first. So let's break it down. So it's that fancy word that basically means being the ruler of your own kingdom, minus the crown and royal court. As you can see, mine is figurative. It's a concept, but also a real deal legal process people can take to declare themselves an independent entity from the government. I mean, it's true. You can renounce citizenship and all that. You don't have to run away to Canada. I'll include a link through my website for anyone that may be interested in the process. But in a world where ownership is often tangled and tainted with control and power, sovereignty just takes a different spin. It's about owning yourself, your decisions, your actions, your time, without needing to physically own much of anything. Sovereignty says, hey, I may not own a mansion, but I own my mind, my energy, you know, my space. It's the ultimate flex, really. Because who needs a bunch of stuff when you've got mental real estate? The irony, of course, is that in chasing after sovereignty, you do find that owning less is actually owning more. It's giving minimalism, really. And sure, maybe it's not as traditionally glamorous as holding up a deed to a house, but then again, you can't really foreclose on inner peace. And Black people, this may or may not resonate with you, considering we weren't allowed to own things for so much of our existence. But that minimalism front, you know, the cure for stuffitis we've all been infected with, you've all seen it, you know, the documentaries where someone gives away 95% of their belongings and suddenly they're a fucking Zen monk with a tidy apartment and a deep sense of purpose. Now, basically the opposite of hoarders, which used to be my guilty pleasure. Okay, it's still my guilty pleasure. Don't judge me. Judge your mama. But it's just funny because minimalism isn't just about owning less. It's about realizing how much ownership owns you. You know, the less you have to worry about maintaining, insuring, and lugging around. It's like deciding to stop playing the game where you collect all the Monopoly properties, only to realize the entire board is rigged against you. You're not quitting. You're opting out of the circus. So while society dangles ownership as the carrot of success, minimalism kind of sneaks in like, nah, I'm good with my 3 pairs of shoes and this nice mug. Thanks. It's like both a rebellion and a release. And in that simplicity, you actually find a sense of sovereignty. In nothing, you find everything. Who knew owning nothing could feel like having it all? And that's a secret to the universe. But really, guys, just imagine walking through life not even worried about owning things, but just enjoying them for what they are. It's so freeing. You know, renting your space, sharing your art, loving people without feeling the need to possess them. Unless that's what they like. but letting go instead of holding on? What if freedom isn't about ownership, but about the absence of it? I mean, that's where real peace might just lie. Just floating through space, living in the moment, unburdened by the weight of having to hold on to things that were never really ours to begin with, that were just weighing us down. And while you're at it, you know what else you can let go of? The idea that you're too busy to catch up on our latest episodes. So make sure to tune into our next podcast episode. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube right down there and follow us on all the socials to stay connected. Trust me, you don't want to let go of this content, y'all. But anyway, see you guys soon. And until then, you know the drill. Always appreciate the abstract in your life.